The views expressed in this episode are solely those of the guest and myself and do not reflect the views of our current or past employers. Hello and welcome to the show. This is Deogratius Okello, your host. Today I welcome Syed. Hopefully I'm pronouncing the name well. Hopefully I'm butchering it. So Syed will tell us a bit about himself, and I would like to actually thank him for coming on the show to share his experience in terms of cybersecurity. So Syed, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. So, actually, it's just a pleasure to be on the show, and I hope people watching can get the best out of this. So, yeah, it's a pleasure, and thank you for having me on and giving me the opportunity to come on and talk about cybersecurity.
You're welcome. So, who is Syed? If someone is meeting you for the first time, who are you?
Yeah. So, first of all, like I'm just we're all, to me, we're all the same. So like that's how I like to start out with that question. Right? We're all the same, no matter what background, what race, what religion, whatever. We're all the same. So I want to start out with that, right? Like but on the professional end, so yeah, I have about 6 years of cybersecurity experience now. I am in my late 20s, and I started out my cybersecurity journey with my undergrad in cybersecurity. And then I completed that at 5 years. I have a whole blog on my undergrad journey as well. So, for those of you interested, you can read it. But the reason I'm saying that is because, success isn't always linear, and I had my ups and downs at undergrad. And as you can attest to, right, cybersecurity is not easy. There's gonna be ups and downs, right? So I did my undergrad in cybersecurity. And then I got an internship at a financial institution here in Canada. And by the way, I'm based out of Toronto. So I've been in Toronto, the Greater Toronto area. So I got a internship at a bank. And then I worked my way up after graduation and got a full-time detection engineering role within the SOC, and then worked there for a bit, and then I transitioned over to IBM in 2022, which was more client facing, while I was in cybersecurity managed services, where I did firewall management and engineering for clients, essentially, with IBM. And then recently, earlier this year, I switched over to another bank, the Royal Bank of Canada. And here I'm doing vulnerability management, and specifically like the scanning engineering portion of it. So like, making sure that, the scanning infrastructure is all set up correctly, or if not, then setting it up correctly, and then making sure the vulnerability management tool that we're using, or the tools, like all the tools that we're using, are good. And specifically, I'm focused more on the IoT component of that, where IoTs are being, scanned efficiently and effectively, and vulnerabilities are being detected on the IoT devices in the enterprise. In addition to that, I'm also a cybersecurity prof. I teach at Seneca Polytechnic in their cyber threat management program. But after last semester, I will take a little break from teaching, as I started my master's in artificial intelligence. So, managing full-time work and teaching and doing masters would have been a little bit too much. So I'm gonna have to take a little break on teaching. But with that being said, yeah, but with that being said, for me, teaching, this is a way of, for me, teaching was always a way to give back to the community, and coming on this podcast is another way of giving back to the community, right? So like for me, it's all about giving back and teaching others, and sharing knowledge and wisdom. So hopefully after I'm done my master's, I can return back to teaching. But I love teaching and I love my students, but I'm trying to focus on my full-time job and master's right now, and then go from there. But yeah, that's just a little bit about me, but I'll throw it back to you, and yeah, we can continue.
Okay. So, you've literally talked about this aspect of teaching. So let's dive deep into that. So you held a cohort of students at Seneca Polytechnic, where you were teaching them SOC tools like Suricata and Elastic, are they very important and critical for a beginner to start with tools like those?
Yeah, so those two tools, and we worked on this, like we being like me and other faculty members, we decided to give that project to our first year students, our first semester students, in the cloud and IoT security class. And the reason we did that was because, you know, having that lab set up where students learn how IDSs work, how logging works, how SIMs work, that is, I think, a great starting point for any beginner in cybersecurity, right? Like just by looking at the logs that Suricata produces, you can see how logs look parsed and unparsed, and then you can use something such as JQ, which is a JSON parser, and then you can parse the log. So that alone is, you know, giving students skills necessary to become like a, you know, a SIM detection engineer, or like, you know, someone that works on log parsing, right? And parsing is something that is not even security related, right? It can be related to data analytics as well. If you want to transition into AI, you're going to be dealing with data. If you're a data scientist, you're going to be dealing with data, right? And knowing how to parse data is critical. No matter if you're in security, AI, tech, whatever it is, like you're going to be working with data, and you need data to be visible, right? So just the data parsing itself and student learning about that, and like different formats like syslog and CEF and all that, right? That gave students the fundamentals of how data is actually parsed, right? And then the SIM is the visualization of the data, right? And Elastic and Kibana are one of the best open source SIMs out there that give you like a representation of like how enterprises actually do it, right? Like how enterprises have SIMs, right, to display the data. And then in that project, we also included the Raspberry Pi component, which kind of acts, well, it is an IoT device, right? So it acts like an IoT device where the we would attach a temperature sensor on the Raspberry Pi, or like a soil moisture sensor, and then the data from that would also flow into from the Raspberry Pi to the cloud, and from the cloud to the Kibana dashboard, basically. So it's a good representation of like all statistics, right? Like IoT statistics, and then also any type of like, you know, DDoS attack or any SYN flood, that would also be detected in the same dashboard. So it gives students a good visualization of how these central log management systems like a SIM work, right? And that's a great project that we thought students would enjoy, and I think the students learned a lot. And for me as an educator, as a prof, my goal is, yeah, I want everybody to get an A plus, but what does that A plus really mean, right? Like, are you learning from something from this course, right? Hands on. And I believe with that project, students were able to learn, you know, the basic fundamentals of a potential blue team career path.
Yeah, I would like to agree on you on that, especially when it comes to blue team. It's not like most unis don't usually consider that so much, and you find that more the things you learn about is maybe attacking and all those things. So you go through things like Nmap, then you play around with these other tools which are for penetration testing, but we don't give so much mind to things which are for blue teaming, which I find it very key, because most of the times you find most organizations are actually leaning towards more of the defensive posture compared to actually the attacking posture. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I feel like there should be a balance of both. I truly believe that in order to be a good blue teamer, you need to know how offensive security works. On the vice versa, in order to be a good penetration tester or a good ethical hacker, you need to know how blue teaming works, right? So I think for me personally, like my experience so far has been solely in blue teaming, a little bit of purple teaming, but I want to while I do my masters, or even after I do my masters, I want to pursue the OSCP. Not because I want to go into penetration testing right away. Maybe long term, maybe, but I wanna know how it is on the other side of the fence. That way, when I am building detection on my side, right, I know what the other side is gonna try to do to exploit my defenses, right? And that just makes me a better blue teamer. And that's why I believe that you should have a good understanding of the other side of the fence. So for my case, I want to have a good understanding of offensive security, just so I can build better detections. right? It's on the vice versa, right? A good penetration tester would want to know what kind of detections are being put in place, what signatures are the AVs using, for example, what kind of firewall rules are in place, right? How a WAF can detect DDoS or SQL injection, for example, right? They wouldn't want to know that, and then they would try to think, how can I exploit this, right? Is there any exploitability available? So I think, you should know both sides of the fence, and then, you should master one, and then you should know enough on the other side, where you can, exploit any flaws or vulnerabilities or even human error, right?
Yeah, that's true. So if you're now leaning into things like DLP, I know you have, set up one for an organization, and what are those things which people usually take for granted when it comes to setting up a DLP that are very integral in the long run?
Yeah, so DLP is it's been a while since I worked the DLP, but I think DLP is great because it protects information that goes outside the organization, right? And oftentimes, like, organizations are very critical, like they don't want any specific information leaving the organization, right? And what I learned from DLP is that, like, it's more so to do with, like, human behavior as well, where UEBA comes into play, user entity behavior analytics. And, for example, you have a disgruntled employee, for example, right? And they may have a motive to send out documentation, confidential documentation, right? So that's where DLP and UEBA comes into play, right? Now, a lot of people internally don't like DLP because, like, DLP does come with a lot of false positives, right? Where, it could detect your own, like, if you have like a Regex rule set up, for example, for a tag, a footnote, right? That's just confidential on the documentation, right? Or like internal. But what if they're sending like information that belongs to them, right? An employee, and DLP flags that. All right. That does I understand that would get annoying, right? Because, I'm sending information that belongs to me. So why is this getting flagged and why is it getting blocked, right? So that's one of the things that, that come with, setting up DLP rules. You have to make sure that your rules are precise, and, like, try to limit, you can't eliminate false positives, as you probably know, being in the field, but try to reduce them as much as possible and try to make it efficient as much as possible, where scenarios like those don't happen, because, too much security is never a good thing, right? And, as you know, the cybersecurity triad, right? The InfoSec triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability, right? Availability, I think, is important as well. So with DLP, you have to keep in mind, you have to set up good rules where availability of the data doesn't get impacted, but also you keep in mind that, any confidential data gets protected and doesn't leave the organization, and then no data is tampered with either, right? So that's integrity. But availability, I feel like, can be impacted at times, but you got to just set up good rules to eliminate the false positives in DLP. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. Now, if you're still looking at still false positives, and when you're looking at it in terms of the SIMs, what have you found really challenging when it comes to reducing them to an acceptable level, especially when it comes to SIMs?
For false positives.
Yes, false positives.
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, same thing when it goes with DLP, and then same thing would go into SIMs as well, right? As a SIM detection engineer, the goal is to make sure that the SOC analyst, the L1 analyst, gets clear, concise alerting, right? And reduce the number of false positives, right? Now, how do you reduce the number of false positives? You can't really get rid of false positives, like I said, but setting up clear rules, setting up rules that have proper logging, right? Say, for example, if the SOC analyst is looking at a firewall alert, right? That comes into the SIM, right? You got to make sure that the alert is properly parsed. The correct information is being flagged on. The IP addresses are properly parsed, MAC addresses are properly parsed, and all that, right? That is gonna save the SOC analyst, especially in L1, that may not have all that experience, right, of triaging, right? They have all the information in front of them, and that way they can go and investigate. efficiently, right? So clear logging, clear parts, clear information goes a long way. Also visualization as well, of the alerts as well goes a long way, like categorizing them, like, oh, on the sim, right, if an L1 is looking at the sim, right, that, oh, this alert belongs to firewalls, this alert belongs to containers, this alert belongs to the IDS, this alert belongs to the IPS. That goes a long way as well. And then from there, you can also use the automation as well in like a SOAR environment. So from like, the sim, you can go to the SOAR, and you can use automation as well to like parse out any anomalies, for example, right? Like any alerts that haven't come before. Like, for example, if you're searching for like a specific user, right, and a specific machine that, is trying to, a machine that's trying to, send stuff outbounds, right? That can be alerted as an anomaly. Same thing if like a unknown IP is, trying to send a bunch of SYN packets, right? And the WAF or the firewall detects it, right? And this IP hasn't targeted your network before, right? That could be an anomaly. So that could stand out on the SIM dashboard or the SOAR dashboard, and that could help the L1s as well investigate. And I feel like a lot of false positives come with, poor logging, right? And poor event correlation. And I think if as detection engineers, as SIM detection engineers, if you put an emphasis on good logging and good event correlation, you can reduce the number of false positives. Also have documentation as well. There's a document called the alerting detection. It's ADS. I can't remember what the S stands for, but it's the ADS documentation. And basically it has every single rule that you have on the SIM. It has the description of those rules, the logic it uses, the logs it uses. And then it also has like the Sigma conversions as well for those rules. Sigma is basically a universal language that can translate into ArcSight, which is a SIM, or Sentinel, or QRadar, or Splunk, right? But like it's a universal language. So in case if your SIM or your SOAR changes vendors, you have all your rules on a GitHub in a YAML file in Sigma, in the Sigma syntax, and that way you can easily use like a tool like SOC Prime to switch over the Sigma universal language into the respective vendor language. That way you don't have any missing detection rules, right? So that's also key as well. And in the ADS document, each specific SIM rule is mapped to MITRE. That's also key as well. Mapping it to MITRE helps the L1 or L2, whoever is investigating, understand the detection when it's alerted better. And they know exactly what happened, how to triage it, how to investigate it. It has all those details in there. So having those ADS documents for each use case, mapping them to MITRE, making sure the use case is named correctly, right, on the SIM. Each rule is named correctly. That's also key as well.
Does that also apply to firewalls, especially the aspect of having a YAML configuration for the entire firewall that you can easily transition from one to the other?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yes. I think that's, yeah, firewalls, and then also containers as well. Like for tools like Aqua, right? For container security, right? That's just key as well. Even like NIDS and HIDS, so intrusion detection systems for them as well. Yeah.
Okay. Now, when it comes to web application security, what should a SOC think about while implementing hardening of the system?
Yeah, so web application security, I think you need a firewall, but then you also need a WAF. And for those of the listeners that don't know, WAF specifically runs on the application layer of the OSI model, right? So the WAF, what it does is it analyzes the HTTPS headers, for example, right? The application their headers, right? And then from there, it's able to detect any potential DDoS or any potential SQL injection, right? So having a WAF in place is extremely important for application security, especially web apps. If you're an external facing business, which a lot of companies are, right? They have their website, right? You want to protect your website. You should have a WAF in there that can detect any type of activity going towards your web application, right? So a WAF is important, but then you also need to have your standard layer 3, layer 4 firewall as well in there, right? That does packet inspection and all that stuff, right? But I think having a WAF is important. Also having like a Cloudflare, right? Like something like Cloudflare in between your web application and your internal network, right? Right after the DMZ is important, right? A Cloudflare is essentially a CDN, right? A content delivery network that is an intermediary in case if a DDoS is happening, right, or any SYN flood's happening, it can act as an intermediary, right, and it can detect like that type of activity, right? So you have the CDN on the outside layer, and then you have your DMZ, and then inside the DMZ, you have a WAF, and then the WAF detects any anomaly as well, and then if God forbid it goes beyond that into your internal network, then you have your firewalls, your IDSs, your IPSs, etc.
Yeah, I would like to agree on you on that, especially that aspect of the using of Cloudflare, and also I think also Akamai is also used a lot. Might as well, yes, that's correct. Yeah, they're really very effective in terms of DDoS attacks. Yes. So, yeah. So what approach do you use in terms of building a good security culture in an organization?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think it all so for the technical folks that are in security, they understand the importance of security, right? But with that, I think with the technical security folks, they have to keep in mind the availability, right? That's also part of security, right? So we have to make sure that we're not disrupting business, right? As the technical security folks, right? So we have to keep in mind the availability. So that's the security culture for the technical security folks. Now let's transition over to the technical non-security folks, like people working in IT, for example, right? Or developers. For them, they need to keep in mind security. Like for developers, they need to keep in mind that it's not about development and operations, it's about development, security, and operations. They need to keep in mind that security should be in all parts of the system development lifecycle, right? Not just at the end when you deploy the application to prod. Security should be an emphasis in the planning stage, in the test stage, etc. Right? And then for change management as well, like those folks for that security culture would be, again, keeping in mind confidentiality, integrity, availability. But again, at the same time, like don't like if it's like a continuous upgrade, right, that you do to your firewalls or to your systems, right, to your servers, right, don't make it hard to get an approval. In the change management, in the change management board meeting, right? That is that impacts security culture in a bad way where, if it takes me a while to get an approval for a standard routine upgrade that I need to do to my firewalls, then I'm gonna just put it off. And then my firewall is gonna be potentially like so many versions behind, and then it could be potentially, it could be on a vulnerable version, right? So that's no good. So those are three examples that I gave. Now I do want to transition over to management as well, with the management and security culture for them, right? Now for them, management doesn't care about the technical stuff. They like metrics. They like, criticality. They like those kind of stuff, right? So for management, I think the best way to tell them how important security is or impose a security culture is for us technical folks to be able to translate the security into stuff that matters. For example, qualitative or quantitative data. Right now, what would be quantitative data? That would be money, right? Finances. Qualitative data would be something like criticality of the data or the information, right? From there, they would be able to determine if the security control is actually worth putting in place. Is there a profit in place, right? Is there a profit? Is there any profitability in putting the security control in place, right? And then, that way they'll be able to understand if, the server or the data or the asset they're trying to protect is actually worth protecting, right? Is a security control gonna, be cost effective, all that stuff, right? So translating into money and terms that make sense to the organizational's goals and objectives to the upper management is how you build a security culture for them. Now, on the other hand, like for employees, and what upper management needs to do is that like they need to have security training, they need to have phishing simulations and all that, right? Just so all the employees are aware of potential, security risks that could come, like a phishing email, right? For example. So security awareness, security training all needs to be there. But that's how you build a good security culture. I think it should be tied into the organization's goals and objectives, and you need to slowly integrate it into your policies and your governance, the way a company governs and policies and procedures, right? You need to implement it.
Yeah, that's 100% correct in terms of, especially the aspect of communicating it from our technical level to management. The language has to definitely be more qualitative than quantitative, because sometimes it's very hard to quantify some of these things to them clearly. So, looking back, what are those skills that you see that you would have wanted to learn at a young age that um, obviously you're still young, but what are those skills that you would have wanted to learn?
Yeah, no, thanks for saying I'm so young. I appreciate that. I think what I would looking back, I think I wish I did a little programming back in high school. But everybody around me, like I remember I wanted to take the in grade 11, I wanted to take a programming course, but my math grade wasn't the best, so the guidance counselor told me that I shouldn't be taking that programming class, right? But I wish I didn't listen to them, and I just took it, and I struggled a little and learned it, because the reason I say that is because when I went to undergrad, I had no clue how programming worked. Like I just did a little bit of like Visual Basics in grade 10, but like if I learned Java in grade 11 and 12, would have made it so much easier in the intro to C class in undergrad. But since I didn't take that Java class, I did not I did not understand C at all, and I ended up failing that class. And um you know long story short, that class and failing that class made me who I am today, and that's more about that on my blog. But I think, going back, if I had a time machine, I would go back and learn Java in grade 11 and 12. I would also learn a little bit of, I would also learn web development as well, just basic web development. But again, this was like 10 years ago, right? So now there's a lot of resources for students, like even in high school, that you can learn this stuff while you're doing high school. And also keep your options open, like getting a degree is great. And if and again, like getting a degree is great, but like you can also do other routes as well to get into the field as well, right? You don't have to get a degree to get into cybersecurity. Right. So that's also one thing that, I mean, like, personally, like, I don't regret getting a degree in cybersecurity, but in the time we're in right now, if I were like 17, 18 right now, and I wanted to, like, get into cybersecurity, I would look into all possibilities. So I'll look at degrees, I'll look at certifications, I'll look at all that stuff. And then based on, what makes sense for me and my financial goals as a student, like as someone that just got to high school, I would, go from there, right? Like there's no one clear path to get into cybersecurity. So yeah, that's those are some of the things. And then just trust your gut, and like, imposter syndrome is there. One thing, and to end off, to answer your question, one thing that I wish I knew when I was younger, and like I still struggle with today, is maybe it's because in the field we work in, right? Imposter syndrome. I wish like I knew more about imposter syndrome back when I was younger, where I would know that it's okay to not know everything, right? For me, like I was kind of like raised in an environment, like with the people around me in my school, where everybody was a perfectionist, know-it-alls, perfectionists, whatever, right? So I had that same mindset. But now when you get into cyber, you're not gonna know everything, right? And that could hinder your self-esteem. It could impact you mentally, but you just got to understand that you're not going to know everything in this field. And no matter what field you're in, you're not going to know everything, right? And people that claim that they know everything in cybersecurity, like, that's not realistic. You're not going to know everything in this field. You're not going to be an expert in everything in this field. You got to keep learning, right? That's how you build. So yeah, that's that imposter syndrome and knowing what it was. But I wish I knew that back in the day. But that's why I'm on here and like other platforms as well, trying to tell the young people or anybody kind of transitioning into the field that imposter syndrome is there, and you're gonna have to deal with it, and that's okay if you don't know everything.
Yes, thank you for that. Second last or last? I want to do second last. What tools would you recommend for someone who is just starting up?
Tools, I would say look into, and we talked about this earlier in the show, but like look into the open source tools like intrusion detection system. So look into Suricata, look into Snort as well. Snort is another good one for SIM. Look into Kibana and Elastic, right? Or even Elk is good. Look into that. Got a Raspberry Pi, or you can do a lot with a Raspberry Pi. It's fun. You can do a lot and learn a lot with it. Also, like, if you want to, and I guess with tools, I also like talk about, like, entry level certifications as well, right? So like you can, look into the ISC2's certified in cyber certification. It's free, I believe. Still, there, it's a great way to start your career. Security Plus is great as well. But work on the projects. Use ChatGPT, use AI to, like, learn as well. Great way to learn. And I like to simplify cybersecurity for people, and cybersecurity at the end of the day, it's all about security, but the security needs to align with on organization's goals and objectives, and it has to align with confidentiality, integrity, and availability, right? You need to make sure all three of those things are there in the system or in the data or whatever you're trying to access, right? All three of those components are there, and there needs to be a balanced approach. So that's how I like to simplify cybersecurity. And then once you get in, once you feel like you have like a certain path you want to take in cybersecurity, because cybersecurity is a mile wide, inch deep, right? That's what they told us during the CISSP, right? And I agree to that. It's huge, right? So once you find out, like, where you want to go, and it may not be technical, you might want to go into governance, right? You might want to go into corporate security, which also ties into the CISSP domain, right? Because that's part of physical security, right? Corporate security, you could be in charge of the physical security of a cloud data center. That's important. That's really important, and that's part of cybersecurity, right? So it's not all about, be technical. What a common misconception that I had going in was that, cybersecurity was all about programming. It's not. You don't need to be a good programmer. I mean, if you are, that's great. That's a plus. But you don't need to be like a software developer to get into this field, right? You can go into GRC, governance, regulation, compliance, right? So, like, keep an open mind, and, if you have the determination to learn and you're okay with imposter syndrome, like, impacting you a little, and you can battle through that, anybody could be fine, work on those projects that we talked about. And yeah, and then that should be a great starting point.
Thank you. Any parting shots where people can find you? Anything that you would want to share with the audience?
Yeah, so LinkedIn, I'm sure you'll post my LinkedIn in the description, right? So yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, so and then, on my LinkedIn, I'm usually active. If there's anybody that, needs, assistance or anything, I'm always open to, helping out. And yeah, just connect with me on LinkedIn. Now, like I said, I'm located in the greater Toronto area, which is in Canada, but again, like, I'm open to, anybody connecting with me, and, like, I'm more than willing to help out anybody that needs help. It's the community is great because, like, the cybersecurity community is great because we all are about helping each other and helping each other, succeed. And I want to see, anybody that wants to get into the field succeed. So reach out on LinkedIn. I'll also give you my email as well. You can put that there. I do plan to also launch my own podcast as well, which is more on that coming up. So stay tuned on my LinkedIn. I'll have that coming soon as well. And yeah, and not only limited to cybersecurity, but I am transitioning over like to AI as well, artificial intelligence as well. So if anybody, you know, anybody, like even if you're like an expert in AI, you want to connect, like I'm all about learning as well, and I would love to learn from you. Or if anybody wants to get into AI as well, reach out to me. I can help you out. I'm also like I have a passion in OSINT as well, which is open source intelligence. So if you're interested in that, reach out to me. Blockchain security, blockchain. I'm I've looked into that as well. So, I'm open to chatting about this stuff, and, learning and connecting with like-minded individuals. And I just wanted to, say thank you again, for having me on and being able to share my experience and my expertise.
Thank you. It has been great having you sharing because I'm also working in a SOC, so it's good to learn from a fellow in the SOC. Other than that, see you all in the next episode. By the way, before we forget, we are on the road to 1,000 subscribers, so be sure to subscribe to the show and like, comment, post, and share with friends and family. See you all in the next episode.